At 17 years old, the world seems a big, daunting place. It's also ripe with opportunity, as the young women at the heart of a new observational documentary make clear. It's called 17 and Life Doesn't Wait, and it captures the pressures and tensions faced by girls during their final year of high school. Audrey Ho is one of those girls. She's now a second-year computer science student at the University of Waterloo, and she joins us from Waterloo. And here in our studio, Maureen Judge. She is an award-winning director. Her last film was My Millennial Life, and her newest creation is the TVO original documentary, 17 and Life Doesn't Wait. Welcome to you both.
Oh, thank you, Nia.
It's nice to see you again since we saw each other last week at the premiere, the world broadcast premiere, and it was a great night. It's nice to see you, Audrey.
Nice to see you guys too.
All right. Maureen, why did you want to make a documentary about 17-year-old girls?
Well, first of all, 17 is a great age because it's an age where the girls are making huge changes in their lives and choices because they're in their final year of high school. So I thought that would be just a good starting point. And I could follow through the changes that they're making. Mm-hmm. But the inspiration actually came after the 2016 elections when Hillary Clinton lost the election, and the whole idea of a glass ceiling suddenly seemed to be very palpable again. And I thought, what is happening to our girls? What do our girls want? And here I had thought that things had changed, and it was very apparent mm-hmm. with the misogyny that also came up after the election and during the election, that it was actually we weren't equal, and that girls were still navigating a very gender-biased society. So
you wanted to find out how they were navigating that?
Yeah, and how successful they could be, and what were the problems and what were the challenges.
Did it take you back to when you were 17?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I found that the girls were a lot more savvy than I was. They also had to confront a lot more problems than I did. They had to deal with the fear of violence in the schools, which they had grown up with, which I didn't grow up with. They had to deal with the idea of economic instability in a much greater way than I did. They had to navigate the pressures of social media. So, I mean, it just goes on and on and on. They had to deal with sort of the changes in sexuality and sort of border blurring of sexuality, which, again, we didn't have to deal with. It's probably a good thing now because things are much more open. But it also puts more pressure on them. And the biggest challenge is they are expected to perform like the boys and to do things the boys do, and yet the expectation and the rewards aren't always there for them.
And I'm curious to find out from Audrey, what was it like to go through your daily life, like just your day-to-day stuff, going to school, hanging out with your friends, but with a camera in tow?
In the beginning, I could definitely tell I was being filmed, and I think it definitely took a couple of months for me to really adjust to being in front of the camera and having the crew follow me around. I thought it was a really, really interesting and really fun experience, though. I kind of felt like a little movie star. But I think, speaking about my personal life, I consider, my life with my friends and my life with my family to be kind of two separate but not entirely separate worlds. So revealing kind of like secrets for one side for the other side, that was, I think, the most kind of terrifying but reflective experience that I went through, because on one hand I was thinking, oh wow, like my friends are gonna know a lot more about my personal life now, and same with my parents finding out, more about my relationships with friends and with my boyfriend.
Did you at any point find that you were maybe editing who you were as a person because of the presence of the camera?
I did consider that, but Maureen and the crew made it feel so comfortable that I just ended up like not even having to think about or worry about, editing my speech or, not saying like anything that I normally say in my daily conversations with everyone else. So it was honestly a very natural experience after getting set up with the crew and getting familiar with how things worked.
This film features three young ladies, Kiki, Mich, Audrey. Maureen, you had incredible access to the lives of these young women. How were you able to do that?
Well, number one, when I have to find, or when I'm looking for access to, especially underage people, but even people kind of 25 and under who live with their families, I find access through the mother.
Why the mother?
The mother, because mothers still tend to run the household and still tend to be the ones to let you into the household. I mean, the access, the emotional access I found through the girls, absolutely. But I had to get access through the family.
Did you at any point come to a place where maybe there was a bit of resistance?
If I come up against resistance, then I know that maybe that's not the right subject. I mean, I interviewed over 100 subjects and met a lot of, and then narrowed it down. And as I was narrowing it down, I would meet the families, or sometimes I met the girls with the families right at the beginning. So I usually had a pretty good idea from my experience as to whether I would get actual access to film. So, yeah. And then the girls gave me access. I mean, you select someone on the basis of how open they're going to be also.
And Audrey, I don't want to give too much away because the documentary is going to be airing after this. But you know, you were going through a lot of things. It's your final year of high school. What kinds of challenges were you dealing with during that year?
Definitely the biggest challenge I dealt with was navigating university applications. Not going to reveal anything, but that was definitely a very big growth experience for me. I was able to learn a lot about myself and understand, you know, this is the type of person I want to be. How do I take the steps towards being that type of person? And also, you know, navigating relationships with friends, family, alongside that, and navigating expectations was also a big challenge for me.
It seemed like you were so busy at one point. And this isn't really giving away too much from the documentary, but at one point we see you at a computer screen and your eyes are closing, like you're falling asleep, but you keep going. Like how busy were you in grade 12?
All through grade 12, I love still pursuing my extracurriculars. But with that being said, on top of that, I also had to write a lot of university essays. So I'd say I was pretty busy. A lot of afternoons and lunches as well, I'd be spending with other students through an extracurricular called DECA that I was very involved in. But at the same time, I was also running a Girls in Tech conference at the time. And that was the first time I'd ever organized something, you know, for like 100+ people. And being able to figure out the logistics of that also took up quite a substantial amount of time.
But why take that on?
I was quite busy, but
why take that? Why take that on? What did that bring to your life when you were so busy already?
Well, I love to pursue anything I'm passionate about, and no matter how busy I get, and no matter, you know, how many meetings or anything I've scheduled into my calendar, I think that pursuing my passions and being able to juggle those things really make me happy. I'll always be able to try to find time to squeeze in, you know, time with family and friends here and there. It's all about being able to find a good balance and, you know, not procrastinating too much, although I did do a fair bit of that in high school.
I think in the film you say you're a professional procrastinator. Or am I making things up? We actually have
definitely a professional procrastinator.
We actually have a clip from the film, and this is with you and your family. Let's take a look.
Like, I really started to think about life more, and I've like thought about just enjoying life. Like, I know, like, you always tell me, like, I think, like, if you just take it easy now, it's gonna be harder later. Like, yeah, I agree with that, but I think it doesn't matter if you're working hard or if you're not. The point of life is just to enjoy it. Like, yes, you're working hard, but you work hard, like, while having fun, right? Like, enjoying the learning process while studying. If somebody wants to get this goal and they want to take a little bit of a break, you know, procrastinate a little bit, and they just enjoy themselves before, like, you know, getting to the harder part, like, that's fine. Like, or they'll get it done in the end, you know? Like, no matter what, it'll get done. It'll be achieved somehow, some way. You don't know how, but, like, it'll be fine.
I love your optimism. You're having a conversation with your family, but they didn't really seem to understand what you were trying to say. Why do you think they had a tough time understanding the pressure that you were under?
I think that, there's definitely a big culture shift, especially since my parents grew up in a very traditional, culture back in China. And so the differences in culture really changes people's perspective. And I think, living in North America, living in Canada, people tend to focus a lot on, experiencing the joys of life, and there isn't, I think, as much pressure to always constantly be working hard, but rather you're working hard because while you're still enjoying life. And so being able to communicate that, I think my parents do understand my perspective, but I'm not entirely sure if they'd agree with it. So I think that's what really makes the differences, because just because of the different values and morals and just society expectations that both types of societies have.
And do you think that they understand you more now they've seen the documentary?
Oh yes, definitely. Especially since coming to university, my parents have become a lot more open, and they've, started to understand, Audrey's more independent now. It's time to, let her go a bit. But of course, there's also going to be moments where my parents will always worry and be very concerned about anything I'm doing, just out of their love and care for me. So it's been a very eye-opening experience, because if I hadn't had this documentary and hadn't had this experience, I don't know if or when I would ever, share a lot of my personal life with my friends, with my parents, especially concerning, my relationships.
There's also two other girls in the film, and that is Mich and Kiki, who's in Florida. Tell us about Mich.
Well, Mich, I decided that I wanted to have Mich in the film because she actually brought a whole other perspective from Audrey. Audrey was straddling East and West and was in a highly academic environment. And Mich was living on her own. She'd moved out of home. She was on welfare. She was at an alternative school. She was highly artistic. She's a fabulous artist and an incredibly compassionate, although so are you, Audrey, compassionate person who loved animals. And she just when I talked to her, she just brought me right in, and she might say the same. But so I felt like this was someone who really was living on the edges, and what was her future going to be like, and what choices would she make? And I think her school had a lot to do with helping her along that year. I mean, it's an amazing school, so.
And Kiki is the final girl, and she's in Florida. Why did you want to include a perspective from the United States?
Okay, so I brought in someone from the States. Kiki I brought in because she's amazing when I met her. So I wanted to sort of start with the person, because in the end it becomes the person. She was also a star basketball player. She's an elite athlete, and I thought that would be really, really interesting, so that I would have an elite athlete. I had a highly academic STEM student, that's Audrey, and then Mich, who's highly artistic, a visual artist. So I thought that it would be a great mix. But I went down to the States originally because at the time it was pre the Me Too, and it was just after the elections, and I thought I might find a more articulate 17-year-old girl who could talk about what was going on in the States in terms of sexual attitudes and gender biases. As it turned out, Me Too happened and everyone became aware of it, and it probably wasn't necessary, but I think it really did add something, because there was also the Parkland incident massacre that happened at the time, so I was able to get their reaction and her reaction and the fear that she lives with. She also brought an African-American perspective, which is very resonant here also, so I thought that that was would add a lot to the film, because I really wanted a mix of people who brought different issues and ideas to the film.
Well, you mentioned the Parkland shooting, and I think it was one of the most compelling pieces in the film, to hear these young people speak about these experiences and what it's like for them to face this firsthand. And we actually have a clip of it, and then we'll talk more after. Let's take a look.
When I heard about the shooting, to me it was kind of worse than like all the rest of them, just because it was people our age, and like we go to school every day, like we go to high school every day, and I just felt like that could happen like to us. A week after the shooting at Stoneman Douglas, and somebody pulled a fire alarm during the passing period, and you guys have seen like how many kids like are out during the passing period. Everybody just started running,
like in classes,
like to class.
Yes.
It was like,
Oh, it scares me.
yeah, it
taking
scared
it
me.
as a joke.
Yeah.
A lot of people are taking it as a joke.
Whenever I hear the school announce code yellow or code red, I run.
Maureen, how did the Parkland shooting affect the kids?
I think it brought home the massacre and the fear that they live with every day. And suddenly it was only 3 hours from Kiki's school, and they were paralyzed by it in some ways. But they also ended up contributing in the March for their lives, and became more active. So I think in a sense it imbued a sense of activism into their lives.
And it was interesting to see the different perspectives of that group of friends, of how how the shooting was covered and why what was happening was happening.
Well, exactly. And the other thing is it kind of leads into a brief discussion, but they're all talking about it, about also the use of force by police, so that community faces on a daily basis. So it's all kind of tied up with guns and violence.
Audrey, in the film, we see you handling different challenges during your final year of high school. The film covered academic challenges, financial violence, racism. Do you think your generation has it harder than any other generation before?
I don't think our generation has it harder, but I think that my generation just has different challenges to go through. And it's kind of difficult to say whether they're harder or not, because, especially in previous generations, it's been very traditional, and there's so many pioneering women who've had to fight so hard for our society to be the way it is right now. So that's why I don't think that the difficulties are exactly harder or easier, but they're just different, especially with social media and how much my generation uses social media. That definitely comes into play with people dealing with insecurities and trying to overcome insecurities and mental health issues.
Do you think that boys your age deal with the same challenges that girls your age do?
I think there is a certain amount of shared difficulties, especially regarding university applications. Everyone goes through that. Everyone knows how difficult it is. That being said, there is different kind of body images and insecurities that girls and guys will deal with. I think that girls will tend to, I'm not entirely sure about this, but a lot of girls do deal with imposter syndrome, whereas I think it's not something that's as common among guys, but there's different, issues with femininity and masculinity that both girls and guys have to deal with.
Last week at the live premiere of the film, you confided, well, you didn't confide, we were in front of a studio, like a big audience, but you told me that when you were in school, you made a conscious decision to befriend only boys. Can you tell us why that is?
So in middle school and even earlier on, I just was unhappy with the amount of drama that took place in my friend group, which was all girls. And I thought, I hadn't really had experience with hanging out with guys before. And from the times that I did hang out with some guys, I really, really enjoyed the experience. It was drama-free, it was all joking around, and I loved it. So I made a very intentional decision to join a friend group that was predominantly male. But along the way, I actually became good friends with a few girls who like shared very similar experiences with me, and we all just wanted to just enjoy ourselves and not have to deal with any like typical girl drama per se. And I'm still best friends with all of them, all of the girls and the guys today. And I think, you know, it's been a really good experience because yes, even though I intentionally did try to find a guy, predominantly guy friend group and a guy best friend, along the way, I have been able to meet such amazing girls. And even at Waterloo, in my computer science program, there is definitely not as many girls as guys. And so now I do find myself leaning towards other girls because we all have that like shared comfort, being the minority here. But so now I'd say that my friend group is probably like almost 50-50 even split. And I'm very happy with the people I'm friends with today.
In the film, you're very open about what's happening in your personal life and what's happening in school. And at the live broadcast, I joked that when I was watching it, I was worried because I'm like, Audrey, your parents are watching. After you left, what was your parents' reaction to some of the things that you revealed in the film?
We actually didn't talk about it because my parents, like, I've kind of told them along the way some of the things that they might learn about my relationship with my boyfriend, any other pressures, our relationship with friends. But they were, I don't know whether they were like too surprised because it's not too uncommon among teenagers to go through some of the experiences that I experienced. But overall, they were just so happy with the film and with how it turned out, and they're just really, really proud of me. So I was pretty relieved. They weren't too, you know, surprised or too, I guess I would say, upset about anything that they found out about.
Well, you could see in the audience how proud they were of you. Watching the film back and going through this process, what have you learned about yourself?
Oh my gosh, it's been such a good learning experience because over this past year, I've really been able to rebuild my self-confidence and build my resilience. And I think that's something that everyone should be able to go through because it's so, so important that no matter what difficulties, no matter what failures anyone goes through, you're able to bring yourself back up and be like, hey, like, even though this happened, it's okay. There are other doors open. There are other opportunities. There's other ways around any difficult situations because at the end of the day, things are going to be okay.
And Maureen, can you tell us about Mich? What happened to Mich after the documentary?
Well, after the documentary, Mich also exhibited incredible resilience, and which we see because she. I don't want to give away anything, but what she is doing now is she's studying about animals and animal care and animal behavior because she loves animals. And this way she is able to do exactly what she wants. She's also got her own apartment, she's got a job, she's working full-time while she's studying. And yeah.
And what about Kiki?
And Kiki is in her second year at Florida Tech University. She also, I didn't say this, but she have a chance, but she also graduated top of the class, summa cum laude, as well as getting a full scholarship. I'm giving it away. To Florida Tech. And so she's riding around on the bus, going to games. She's an elite athlete there, and she's studying biomedical sciences. So she's on her way.
Well, thank you both for being here. I think one of the great things about this film, Maureen, is that it's able to give, it allows young people to be seen while also showing young people that parents used to be people before they were parents, right?
Yeah,
and
we
parents
try.
really want parents really want the best for their kids. So it kind of brings the two groups together, and it allows each group to be seen, which I think is really powerful. So thank you for making the film.
Oh, thank you for having me in, and I love talking about it with you. So.
And Audrey, congratulations.
Maureen did such a great job. Thank you.
And Audrey, congratulations for hanging in there and pursuing your dreams. We're also very proud of you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you both for being here tonight.
Thanks.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.